המתנה הלוואי שהמדבר יצמיח עשב דשא הלוואי ועוד נשב בצל התאנה הלוואי שלא נכאב ואיש אחיו יאהב הלוואי ויפתחו שוב שערי גן עדן הלוואי ויתמזגו מזרח ומערב הלוואי הלוואי ונחדש ימינו כאן כקדם הלוואי ולא יישא עוד גוי אל גוי חרב הלוואי ולא ננטוש את דרך התקווה הלוואי והאדם יהיה רחום עד הערב הלוואי שיש סיכוי אחד לאהבה הלוואי שלא נכאב ואיש אחיו יאהב הלוואי ויפתחו שוב שערי גן עדן הלוואי ויתמזגו מזרח ומערב הלוואי הלוואי ונחדש ימינו כאן כקדם
על הגועל
הלוואי שלא נכאב ואיש אחיו יאהב הלוואי ויפתחו שוב שערי גן עדן הלוואי ויתמזגו מזרח ומערב הלוואי הלוואי נחדש ימינו כאן כקדם הלוואי שלא נכאב ואיש אחיו יאהב הלוואי ויפתחו שוב שערי גן עדן הלוואי ויתמזגו מזרח ומערב הלוואי ונחדש ימינו כאן כקדם
הללויה לעולם הללויה ישירו כולם במילה אחת פה תודה הלב מלא בהמון תודה והולם גם הוא איזה עולם נפלא הללויה עם השיר הללויה על יום שמאיר הללויה על מה שהיה היה ומה שעוד לא היה הללויה
הללויה לעולם הללויה ישירו כולם והאימרים הגדולים יהדהדו בהמון צלילים ואיתנו הם יאמרו הללויה
הללויה הללויה עם השיר הללויה על יום שמאיר הללויה על מה שהיה ומה שעוד לא היה הללויה
ברכנו השם אלוקינו בכל מעשה ידינו בכל מעשה ידינו ברכנו השם אלוקינו וברך את שנתנו וברך את שנתנו תן תלומתם על פני האדמה ממה תן תלומתם על פני האדמה תן תלומתם על פני האדמה ממה תן תלומתם על פני האדמה ברכנו השם אלוקינו בכל מעשה ידינו בכל מעשה ידינו ברכנו השם אלוקינו וברך את שנתנו וברך את שנתנו תן תלומתם על פני האדמה ממה תן תלומתם על פני האדמה ברכנו השם אלוקינו בכל מעשה ידינו בכל מעשה ידינו ברכנו השם אלוקינו וברך את שנתנו וברך את שנתנו תן תלומתם על פני האדמה ממה תן תלומתם על פני האדמה ברכנו על פני האדמה
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, שא עיני אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. So we have an interesting study ahead. Of course, we're in the middle of Hakham. Last night we had a Passover Seder, a Karaite Passover Seder here in Israel, in the Golan Heights, where I live. We had a nice Seder. A bunch of people came, and we discussed the Exodus. We discussed the verses in the Tanach about the story of the Exodus, and it was very nice. We sat outside and we had some good food and some good conversation and all of this kind of stuff. And we did not do the rabbinical Passover Seder, which a good friend of mine, I shouldn't say a good friend of mine, I should say a friend of a good friend of mine. So a good friend of mine put me in contact with a certain person who he did his PhD thesis, and this good friend of mine knows who I'm speaking about, did his PhD thesis on the Greek influence, the influence of Hellenistic culture on the Judaism of the Second Temple period, or specifically the later Second Temple period. So the Greeks, they took over the land of Israel. They took over the entire Middle East, essentially. When Alexander the Great conquered all of his territory, I don't remember the exact year, but I think it was around he was born in 332 CE, if I remember correctly. So thereabouts. So we'll say 300 BCE, give or take, and conquered the land of Israel from the Persians. And then they began a systematic institution of Hellenistic culture across their entire empire. So Alexander the Great was a proponent of Hellenistic culture. And the generals that took over from him, the Seleucids or Seleucus was the general that took over in the land of Israel, and he also was a proponent of Hellenism, as was the general Ptolemy down in Egypt. So that began a period, the Hellenistic period, or the period of Hellenistic influence in the land of Israel, until the Romans, until the Hashmonaim came in approximately, I think it's around 165 BCE, if I'm not mistaken. And they essentially kicked out the Greeks, the Seleucid Greeks, from much of the territory. That's the Hanukkah story. And so the Hashmonaim, the Hasmoneans, were in control of the land of Israel until the year 63 BCE, when the Pharisees who hated the Hasmoneans, invited in the Romans. Basically, they literally opened the gates of Jerusalem to allow the Romans to come in. So thank you, Pharisees, for allowing the Romans in. Of course, those same Romans would, approximately 140 years later, destroy the Second Temple, which I believe the Pharisees were more than happy about, despite their crocodile tears over it. At any rate, so this particular person who wrote his PhD thesis on the Greek influence, the influence of the Hellenist Greeks over that period in Israel, speaks about, so if you've ever been to a rabbinical Passover Seder, you know that some of the elements of the rabbinical Passover Seder are you have to drink 4 glasses of wine, you recline. In fact, one of the 4 questions, the famous 4 questions of the Passover Haggadah, the rabbinical Passover Haggadah, is why do we recline when we eat on this day, whereas on other days we don't recline? That's the 4 questions, one of the 4 questions. And you have to drink 4 glasses of wine. And it actually says in the Passover Haggadah, once all of these things are done, the reclining, the drinking of wine, and a bunch of other customs, that we've completed the Passover Seder according to its I think it's meaning its laws and its statutes. So they made it sound like this is a must, and in fact, in rabbinical Judaism, it is a must. Okay, so let's look at something called the Greek Symposium. The Greek Symposium. And I'll just read. Actually, let me bring up the window so we can see it. Oops, what's going on here? Circling beach ball, stopped. So let's bring up the Greek Symposium. Let's learn about the Greek Symposium for a second. And we will see something interesting. We will see something interesting. Window. Boom. There we go. Okay, so what was the Greek Symposium? Make this a little bit larger so you can see it. So the ancient Greek symposium, symposion, drinking together. So sim means together, like Sanhedrin, like synchronicity, like synchronize. Was a formal male aristocratic social gathering centered on drinking, conversation, music, and entertainment, usually occurring after banquet. Held in the andron, the men's room, and that doesn't mean that, like the toilet in the McDonald's or something like that. Held in the men's room. It probably should have been held in the men's room, but no, it was held in the room where men gathered. Participants reclined on couches. Often debating philosophy or politics. If you read through the rabbinical Haggadah, if you've ever attended a rabbinical Passover Seder, which I've been doing since basically I'm a baby, since I grew up as a rabbinical Jew, conservative, not Orthodox, you'll see there's a lot of debates that are quoted from, I guess it would be the Amor Na'im already mentioned. So basically the Mishnaic and the Talmudic rabbis, or maybe it's just the Mishnaic rabbis. At any rate, doesn't matter. The early rabbis, and you see them debating philosophies. For instance, they have a contest as how many plagues actually occurred, always won, of course, by Rabbi Akiva, who was the greatest of the great for them, one of the worst offenders of Torah distortion in the history of Judaism. And so, whatever, it doesn't matter. He wins the debate by saying there were actually 250 plagues at the Dead Sea, when, of course, no plagues are mentioned at the Dead Sea. Neither here nor there. So key aspects of the Greek Symposium derive from sin together and posis, drinking. The event was a structured drinking party was a staple of Greek social life. So a structured drinking party. Well, if you've ever been to rabbinical Passover Seder, that's essentially what it is. It's a structured drinking party. The focus of the rabbinical Passover Seder is the 4 cups of wine. And boy, I'm telling you, you don't want to be around the Seder when it gets into the late evenings. Everyone's either asleep or acting like a complete idiot, mostly asleep. Actually, usually what happens, and like I said, I grew up every year. We did not. In my family, we did not drink a lot. We did tiny, tiny, tiny little glasses. It was unbelievable, almost like a shot glass of wine. But at Passover Seder's that I've been to over the years, basically what happens is, so the focus, everyone's waiting for the meal. So you start in my Passover Haggadah, which was this sucker right here. Let's see. Oops. This was the Passover Haggadah we used when I was growing up. Oops, where'd it go? That one right there. And everyone knew, we all knew exactly where the meal was, on what page the meal was. Now I forgot. I think it's page 27 or 28, right? So you couldn't wait to get to page 28 so you can have the meal. And then, so everyone, the first half of the Passover Haggadah, everyone's waiting for the meal because everyone's hungry. And you're going through all these prayers and stuff, which part of them are very nice. And some are kind of boring. But then you get to the meal, and by that time you've had 2 glasses of wine. And then you pig out on the meal. You have 2 glasses of wine under your belt. And then what does everyone do after the meal? They all fall asleep. Because right after the meal is the 3rd glass of wine. So then everyone either leaves or sleeps through the second half of the Seder. That's a typical rabbinical Passover Seder. So again, let's read more about the Greek Symposium. The event was a structured drinking party. It was a staple of Greek social life, separating men from women, except for hired entertainers like flute girls. So the setting, held in private homes in a dedicated room called an andron, which contained 7 to 15 couches. Guests wore garlands, and the atmosphere was convivial yet choreographed. So choreographed is the key, just like the Passover Haggadah is the choreography of the rabbinical Passover Seder. Oh, I'm sorry, still this one right here. So wine and service, participants drank wine mixed with water, usually 3 or 4 parts water to 1 part wine to maintain moderation. The mixture was held in a large central jar, the crater, and served by young men. It doesn't matter. The point is the wine. Okay. Beyond drinking, the symposium featured intellectual conversation, poetry recitals, dancing, and musical performances. It was a venue for socializing and displaying a host's wealth, so intellectual conversations. If you ever read through the rabbinical Passover Haggadah, you'll see that you're going to have a hard time finding the actual Passover story. There is a one section of the Passover story called Magid. So I think it's 10 sections. I don't remember exactly, 10 sections. And one of them is called Magid, which is only one of 10 sections of the Haggadah, where you're actually telling the Passover story, kind of, but you're not even telling the Passover story because it's constantly interjected with all this rabbinical interpretations and storytelling. But at any rate, the focus is not really on telling the Passover story. It's much more on this kind of stuff, intellectual conversations, some poetry recitals. I don't know about dancing and musical performances. I guess the rabbis, couldn't take it that far. Cultural significance. We can skip that part. The leader was chosen to manage the evening, deciding how strong the wine would be and how many rounds would be drunk, emphasizing the value of moderation. Well, that is definitely not emphasized in the rabbinical Passover Seder. I just want to also find the one other element of it, if I could find it. Games, musical performance, exclusion of citizen run at the Komos. exclusion of citizen women. I can't find it right now, but another element of it, maybe we'll ask AI, was that they reclined. They reclined. So let's ask AI, did during Greek symposium, did people recline? So reclining was a standard posture for elite men during a Greek symposium. This practice was not just about comfort, it was a symbol of leisure, status, and participation in refined social culture. So guests typically reclined on their left side, propping themselves up on their left elbow. So in the rabbinical Passover Seder, you're supposed to recline to your left side. I'll show you that in a second. So they used often couches, etc. It doesn't matter. To maintain their position for hours, guests use cushions. You'll see that at a Passover Seder, that there are a lot of cushions, because we're not supposed to be like slaves. We're supposed to be reclining with pillows. So generally, traditionally, pillows will be placed on every chair. And so on. So let's even ask AI, since we're into AI, let's first, what are the laws for reclining at a Passover Seder? Hope you guys can all see that. Let me just check in. In Jewish tradition, the act of reclining during the Passover Seder is known as haseva. It is a central ritual required to fill the obligation of appearing as a free person or royalty. Wow, I wonder where they got that from. We saw that in the Greek Symposium, that also the people reclined. And we saw in the Greek Symposium that they reclined to what? To the left. The laws of reclining are specific and primarily based on safety and tradition. I don't know how it's safe to recline to the left, but at any rate, lean to the left. Everyone, including left-handed individuals, must recline to their left side. Gee, where did we see that before? Let's go back up. How they reclined in the Greek Symposium. Guests typically recline on their left side, propping themselves up on their left elbow. So they reclined. They drank. They had an order to the amount of rounds of wine they would drink. Must lean on a physical object such as a cushion. We saw that in the Greek Symposium. They had cushions placed on the chairs, on the couches. Since we no longer use Roman-style couches, modern practice involves tilting one's body to the left while seated in the chair, ideally using pillows for comfort. Reclining. So when is reclining mandatory? In the rabbinical Seder, during the 4 cups of wine. We said that there are 4 cups of wine. It's in every rabbinical Passover Haggadah, every rabbinical Passover, I think we call it a prayer book or program, written program. Each of the 4 ritual cups of wine must be drunk while reclining, and so on and so forth. So I remember many years ago when I lived in Jerusalem. Now I live in the north of the country in the Golan Heights, but many years ago when I lived in Jerusalem, back when I was married, we were invited to a Passover Seder with these very strict Orthodox Jews, and it was the most ridiculous thing. I think we actually walked out, if I remember, in the middle of the Seder. It was so annoying. I think we excused ourselves and left. But so this particular head of the household, young man, must have been in his 30s or something like that, he understood that you're supposed to recline to your left when you're drinking the 4 cups of wine. And I guess he'd read somewhere, I don't know which book of halakha, which Jewish law book it's in, but he read somewhere that reclining only means that you must be tilted to your left at a greater than a 45-degree angle. So you can try that in your seats right now. Okay, but if this is your body sitting straight up, you have to be tilted to the left at greater than a 45-degree angle. So basically, like, well, see you guys later. Because if it's less than a 45-degree angle, then you're more upright than lying down, and it's not doesn't qualify halachically according to Jewish law as reclining. This guy, when he drank his 4 cups of wine, would lean over to like a 50-degree angle or something like that. So he was like this, okay? And then his wife would come over and try to pour the glass of wine in his mouth, because you're supposed to be reclining while you drink the wine. So I encourage you to try this at home, or maybe I should say don't try this at home, because what's going to happen is it's basically impossible to drink while you're in that position. If you don't choke, for sure you're going to get the wine all over your clothes and the floor and the couch, and that's exactly what happened. It was all over the place. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my life. So that's how ridiculous. Shalom Rav, Shalom Lecha, Mehemet Kuglu. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And it was just an embarrassment, which, of course, that's what rabbinical Judaism is. It's an embarrassment. It's a Hellenistic embarrassment. Yes, it is. So I think we get the idea. So the next time you go to a rabbinical Passover Seder, and by the way, I did go to rabbinical Passover Seder this year just because out of nostalgia, and because I grew up going to rabbinical, all right, so out of nostalgia, and also because rabbinical Passover was not on the same night as Karaite Passover. So we spoke about this in the Passover class, which you can go look up on the World Alliance of Qara'im YouTube channel, or the Karaite Insights YouTube channel, if you want to watch the Passover class. So, so I went, and it's a lot of fun. I'm not going to say it's not a lot of fun. And the family I went to, they're super fun, super nice people. And we had a lot of interesting discussions. They love talking about the differences between, or the father loves talking about the differences between Charism and rabbinical Judaism. So we got into that a little bit in a very respectful way. But it's a Greek symposium. It's a Greek symposium. So the next time you go to a rabbinical Passover Seder, realize that you're actually going to a Hellenistic Greek symposium. And if that ain't typical for the rabbis, if that don't tell us what the rabbis really are all about, then I don't know what does. Well, there are plenty of other things that do. Basically, the rabbis, the Pharisees, later the rabbis, they instituted, they took Greek Hellenistic behavior, thought. They basically, rabbinical Judaism is, well, I guess it's a lot more complicated than that, but to a certain degree, to a large degree, at least rabbinical Judaism that harkens back to the Hellenistic period and maybe beyond into the Roman period, is a shiluv. It's a combination of Torah and Hellenistic thought patterns, which is why it's such a disgusting, disgraceful mess, which must and will be eliminated off the face of the earth before the nation of Israel has any chance of coming back to its source and has any chance of all of these wars, such as the one we're undergoing right now, disappears. There cannot be peace in Israel until we reject, as I've been saying for years, decades, till the nation of Israel rejects the two false philosophies of rabbinical Judaism and Western secular culture, and returns to the true Torah, the Tanach, which is why, in addition to calling myself Karaite and calling our movement or our organization the World Alliance of Qara'im, for a number of years now, another name for our movement has been the Chozrim B'Tanach, the Return to Tanakh movement. Those who understand what Chozrim B'Tshuva is in Israeli society, or even just in general Jewish society, understands the play on words when I say Chozrim B'Tanach. So that's that. All right, so let's dig in. Let me put a song up. And I'm just going to grab a glass of water. And we're back in like a minute or so, a couple minutes. This one. Okay. Be right back. Okay, we are back. So let's start digging into our study. Any questions, any comments so far? Have you guys attended any Greek symposiums lately? Or rabbinical seders? Pretty much the same thing. Okay, let's dig in now. We're going to do a little bit of biblical archaeology. So let's dig into that. Let me share the screen again. So we can close out that. Well, we'll just leave this open. And we're going to talk about something called the Cyrus cylinder. Very, very interesting piece of biblical archaeology. And we're going to look at the actual verses in the Tanakh that relate to what's being said in the Cyrus cylinder. So let's read about this. So the Cyrus cylinder is a 2,600-year-old baked clay artifact, hailed as the first charter of human rights, but that's not relevant to us, discovered in the ruins of Babylon in 1879. And you can actually visit, if you want to go to Iraq, you can actually visit the ruins of Babylon, which were, believe it or not, rebuilt by Saddam Hussein before he was killed by the United States. It contains a let me just see if my cat wants to come here. Joshua, come, baby. Come here, you. Get over here. Come, baby. Come. Oh, God. Not that chair. Come here, baby. Come. Come, sweet. You behave yourself? Huh? Over there. Okay, so it contains a declaration in Akkadian, which is a early Semitic language, early and later. Cuneiform script. We know what cuneiform is, right? Cuneiform is etched into wet clay with a stylus, used by the Persian king Cyrus the Great. We'll maybe talk about it a little bit after his conquest of the city of Babylon in 539 BCE. So just to put this in context, so the Babylonians, they exiled the Jews, many of the Jews, they destroyed Jerusalem, destroyed the temple, the first temple, and exiled the Jews in 586 BCE. The Babylonians had actually teamed up with the Medians to conquer the Assyrians. Well, we don't need to get into all the details. At any rate, to make a long story short, the Medians then conquered the Babylonians. I don't remember the exact year offhand. I'd have to look it up. But within a couple of decades afterwards, that was the end of the Babylonian Empire. And then the Persians conquered the Medians. The Persians and the Medians were both essentially tribes of the kind of the general, that general area up in the Zagros Mountains of western Iran, and then the plain beyond. Well, the Medians and the Persians both lived in the Zagros Mountains. The Medians up further north, the Persians further south. To make a long story short, and that's why often the Medians and the Persians are spoken about together, because they were essentially part of the larger set of tribes that occupied modern-day Iran. But the Persians eventually gained control, and the king that did this, that essentially created the Persian Empire, was this King Cyrus, also known as Cyrus the Great. Very interesting, a bunch of history there, how he did it, and the entire Persian dynasty that remained in control until Alexander the Great conquered the Persians. The Greeks and the Persians were arch enemies for a while, and eventually the Greeks, Alexander the Great, conquered the Persian Empire, basically just completely destroyed the Persian Empire. At any rate, neither here nor there. So let's get back to the Cyrus film. The point is that Cyrus was he was the first king of what's called the Achaemenid Persian Empire. Basically, the first king of the fully expanded or expanding Persian Empire. First king of the Persian Empire. Let's put it that way. So, okay, the text portrays Cyrus as being chosen by the Babylonian king Marduk to restore peace and order after the impious rule of the previous king Nabonidus. Nabonidus was the last Babylonian king of the what's called the Neo-Babylonian Empire. The biblical connection, and this is what we care about. So while the cylinder does not specifically name Jews or Jerusalem, its message of allowing deported peoples to return home and build their temple strongly parallels the biblical account in the book of Ezra, which we'll look at. It records Cyrus's policy of repatriating displaced populations and restoring their sacred shrines, a rare act of religious and cultural pluralism in antiquity. And in fact, it's understood by most historians that one of the great reasons for the success of the Persian Empire, and they were at the time the largest empire that the world had ever seen, and they reigned from, again, I don't remember the exact year when Cyrus rose to the throne, but approximately 550 BCE, give or take, until around 300, give or take, BCE. So we're talking about 250 years. And then they were completely destroyed. And of course, we have the 250th anniversary of the United States coming up. Is it this year? Oh my God, it's this year. Wow. 1776, 2026. Let's hope they don't go the way of the Persian Empire, although I think they very well might. A lot of problems there. At any rate, so, all right, the Shah of Iran promoted the cylinder as a symbol of 2,500 years of Persian monarchy in the world's first human rights charter. A replica is currently on display at the United Nations headquarters in New York. And so on and so forth. Okay, so the original artifact is housed in the British Museum. So let's, yeah, we could do this. Would you like to explore the differences between the cylinder's text and the biblical version in Ezra? Well, what I would like to do is get the actual text. So let's give them a yes. Do I click on this? Yes. I think I just click on this. Differences of similar text and biblical version in Ezra. Sure, let's go for that. And hopefully it'll bring up the actual text in the cylinder that we want to focus on. And by the way, let's get a look at this, at the cylinder. So Cyrus cylinder. Let's get an image of it. So there you go. Okay, that's the Cyrus cylinder. You can see the cuneiform. So the primary difference between the Cyrus cylinder and the Book of Ezra is their religious and geographic focus. While they describe the same general Persian policy of repatriation and temple restoration, each text attributes these actions to a different deity and prioritizes different regions. So I would like to get the actual text. So, but at any rate, the Cyrus cylinder credits the chief Babylonian god, Marduk, with choosing Cyrus to restore order. Focuses on restoring Babylonian cult centers and deities like those in Susa and Ashur. Oh, this is so annoying with the ask about thing. I could do it like this. Okay, restoring idols. Scribes returning the statues of various gods to their original sanctuary. Let's just read the actual full text of the Cyrus cylinder. Okay, just try clicking on that. Let's see if we can find it. Cyrus's prayer, building activities. Here, this is the key here. Okay, let's read a little bit just to get an idea of who this dude Cyrus was. So Marduk, that of course was the god that the false god that Cyrus worshipped as the head of the pantheon. That's where you get the name Mordechai, for instance. So all the people of Sumer and Akkad who had become corpses, he was reconciled and had mercy upon them. He searched everywhere. This is Marduk, searched everywhere, and then he took a righteous king, his favorite, by the hand. He called out his name, Cyrus, king of Anshan. So Anshan is that region, was that local. So Cyrus's father was the king of Anshan. It's a province. I think it's a province even in modern day Iran. It's still called Anshan. It's essentially where the Persian Empire grew out of and eventually conquered the Medes under Cyrus. He pronounced his name to be king all over the world. He made the land of Gutium and all the Umanmanda bow in submission at his feet. And Cyrus shepherded with justice and righteousness all the black-headed people. Black-headed people are the Sumerians. The word Sumer, I believe actually it itself means black-headed people, or if not, then the endonym for the Sumerians meant black-headed people. I think Sumer itself means black-headed people. At any rate, over whom he had given him victory, Marduk, the great lord, guardian of his people, looked with gladness upon his good deeds and upright heart. And Cyrus takes Babylon. So remember, the Babylonians had recently conquered the Assyrians. They did this not long before after they conquered the Assyrians, they basically took over the entire Assyrian Empire, which included Judea, which included Jerusalem. And then soon afterwards, and if you read the book of Daniel, we actually have Daniel's prophecy of the writing on the wall, which says explicitly that the Babylonian Empire will soon end and be conquered by the Persians. That's exactly what happened. He ordered him to go to his city, Babylon. He set him on the road to Babylon, and like a companion and a friend, he went at his side. This is Marduk ordering Cyrus to go to Babylon. In other words, to conquer Babylon. His vast army, whose number, like water of the river, cannot be known, marched at his side fully armed. This harkens back to statements, for instance, in the Torah, speaking about the descendants of Abraham, who will be so great, like the sand on the seashore, that they will not be even countable. There will be so great number that they will not be countable. I'm not saying that this is related to the other. It might have very well been just a common concept back then. He made him enter his city, Babylon, without fighting or battle. He saved Babylon from hardship. He delivered Nabonidus, the king who did not revere him, into his hands. Again, this is Marduk delivering Nabonidus, the last king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire. The king who did not revere him, into his hands. All the people of Babylon, all the land of Sumer and Akkad, princes and governors, bowed to him and kissed his feet. They rejoiced at his king. It must have been a lot of spittle on Cyrus's feet. They rejoiced at his kingship, and their faces shone. And we can skip ahead a bit. I am Cyrus, king of the world, great king, mighty king, king of Babylon, king of Sumer and Akkad, king of the four quarters, the son of Cambyses. So that was his father, who was the king of Anshan. And there's a descendant of Cambyses, also called Cambyses, that leads to the whole thing, that ultimately leads to the rise of another king that's mentioned in the Tanakh named Dariavesh. At any rate, let's go ahead. I took up my lordly abode in the royal palace amidst rejoicing and happiness. This is, of course, talking about himself. Marduk, the great lord, established as his fate for me a magnanimous heart of one who loves Babylon, and I daily attended to his worship. My vast army marched into Babylon in peace. I did not permit anyone to frighten the people of Sumer and Akkad. So Babylon was originally a Sumerian city. So when it says Sumer, and not Samaritan, Sumerian, S-U-M-E-R, not to be confused with the Samaritans in Samaria. And then Babylon was eventually conquered by the Assyrians, and the Babylonians hated the Assyrians, and so they essentially teamed up with the Medians to overthrow the Assyrians, but then the Medians overthrew the Babylonians, and then the Persians overthrew the Medians. It's a whole big thing. I sought the welfare of the city of Babylon. We can skip ahead a little bit. Let's just get to the place which is relevant. Let me find it. Where was it? Where was it? Here we go. So I returned. So, okay, we should read this whole thing. And in peace before him, we moved around in friendship throughout the world, from the upper sea to the lower sea, who live in the districts far off, the kings of the west, who dwell in tents, all of them. So I assume when it says the upper sea, this is speaking about the Caspian Sea, which is on the northern border of Iran, and the lower sea, I'm assuming, is speaking about the Persian Gulf, I assume. Who live in the districts far off, to the kings of the west, who dwell in tents, all of them. Brought their heavy tribute before me, and in Babylon they kissed my feet, from Babylon to Ashur and to Susa. Susa is Shushan, that's mentioned in the book of Esther. It was the summer. I believe the summer, was it the winter? I believe it was the summer capital of the Achaemenid, in other words, of the Persian Empire. The winter capital being Persepolis, which was destroyed by Alexander the Great. That was really the capital of the Persian Empire, and so on and so forth. Okay, so it's talking about a bunch of gods. I return. This is the key here. This is the key verse that's usually understood as giving reference to what Cyrus did, which we'll look at for the Jews, which we'll look at briefly in the book of Ezra. I return the images of the gods who had resided there to their places, and I let them dwell in their eternal abodes. I gathered all their inhabitants and returned to them their dwellings. In other words, the Babylonians had been very harsh on their subjects. They did not allow, they basically stole all the gods of the various kingdoms that they conquered and brought those gods to Babylon. And now Cyrus is returning the gods to these various temples. He's conquered a whole bunch of kingdoms, and he's returning the gods to their various temples and allowing each kingdom to worship their own gods. In fact, he wants the kingdoms to worship their own gods, as we'll see in the book of Ezra, because the more the merrier. The more gods that are faithful or that are friendly towards Cyrus, then the better. The more Cyrus feels like he has protection from a larger pantheon of gods. I shouldn't say pantheon because that implies it's all one set of gods, but from more gods. In addition, at the command of Marduk, the great Lord, I settled in their habitations in pleasing abodes the gods of Sumer and Akkad, whom Nabonidus, to the anger of the Lord, had brought into Babylon. So, in other words, he's saying that Nabonidus, that's the last king of the Babylons, had taken the gods of Sumer and Akkad, of the Sumerians and the Akkadians, and brought them to Babylon. He stole their gods. And now, so basically what this is saying is Cyrus is returning the gods to the kingdoms that the Babylonians had, when they conquered kingdoms, had taken all the gods, meaning the idols, and brought them to Babylon, right? As a sign of conquering. My God is stronger than your God. But Cyrus took another approach and allowed and returned these gods to their native places, therefore winning the favor of the kingdoms that he conquered. And that was kind of the way that the Persians ruled over their empire. They didn't rule over them harshly, in a harsh manner. They ruled over them by trying to establish good relations with them. And that's probably one of the reasons they were able to have rule over so many empires, or so many kingdoms, I should say. The book of Esther, of course, mentions 127 provinces from Hodu ad Kush, from India, or at least the Indus River Valley, which is in modern day Pakistan, no, modern day Afghanistan, I believe, to Kush, which is Ethiopia. But really, there were satrapies. And so I think there were 20 satrapies in the Achaemenid Empire. Doesn't matter, either here nor there. May all the gods whom I settled in their sacred centers ask daily of Bel and Nabu that my days be long, and may they intercede for my welfare. So we see here the reason that he returns all the gods. He's being kind to these gods. He was an idol worshiper, so he believed that these gods had some kind of power, and maybe not as powerful as Marduk, but that they had some kind of power, and the more people and the more gods rooting for him, then the better off he would be. As for Cyrus, the king reveres you, and Cambyses, his son, and so on and so forth. Okay, now let's look very briefly at the book of Ezra and see how this relates to Jewish history. So let's get over to the book of Ezra. I'll read the English. There's no reason if we need to look at something in Hebrew, we will. So this is how the book of Ezra begins. In the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, and let's just ask Rabbi AI, the only rabbi I trust. Hello, Rabbi AI, what happened to you? Uh-oh, there we go. So in what years did Cyrus Great reign? So 559 BCE to 530 BCE. So 559 to 550 BC, he began his reign as the king of Anshan, a region in modern-day Iran, while serving as a vassal to the Median Empire. In 550, after successfully rebelling against and defeating his grandfather, the Median king Astyages, Cyrus founded the Achaemenid Empire and ruled as its supreme monarch until his death. So for 20 years, essentially, he ruled over the expanded Persian Empire. So this is speaking about, I would imagine, the year 550 BCE is what we're speaking about here, because it's really when he became king over the expanded Persian Empire. So Ezra 1 says, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, and this would fit right in more or less. So the first temple was destroyed in 586 BCE. There were already exiles before that, or the Jews were already exiled partially before that. At any rate, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord spoken by Jeremiah, who said that the exile would last for 70 years, the exile of the Jews would last for 70 years in Babylon, Yahweh moved the heart of Cyrus, king of Persia, to make a proclamation throughout his realm and also put in writing. This is what Cyrus, king of Persia, says. Yahweh, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem and Judah. Any of his people among you may go up to Jerusalem and Judah and build the temple of Yahweh, the God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem. And may their God be with them. And in any locality where survivors may now be living, the people are to provide them with silver and gold, with goods and livestock, and with free will offerings for the temple of God in Jerusalem. Then the family of the heads of Judah and Benjamin. So Judah was exiled, and the kingdom of Judea consisted essentially of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. So it's speaking about the exiles in what was Babylon and now Persia. And the priests and Levites, everyone whose heart God has moved, prepared to go up and build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. All their neighbors assisted them with articles of silver and gold and with goods and livestock and with valuable gifts, in addition to their free will offerings. Moreover, King Cyrus brought out the articles belonging to the temple of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem and placed in the temple of his God. Cyrus, king of Persia, had them brought by Mithredath, the treasurer, who counted them out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. So we see, and then we have a list of names of those who returned, including most famously Zerubbabel and Joshua, the priest. So that's the connection between the Cyrus cylinder and what we read in the book of Ezra. Right? So once again, just to sum up, in the Cyrus cylinder, we see that Cyrus returned, that Nabonidus, the last king of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, or actually Nebuchadnezzar, I guess the final kings of the Neo-Babylonian Empire, when they conquered nations, had stolen their gods and brought them to Babylon. And now Cyrus is returning those gods, quote unquote, lowercase g, gods, to the places where they'd come from, because he's now taken over the Babylonian Empire. And on top of that, asking each of the people to have their gods pray for Cyrus. And that is very much in line with what we see here, that he encourages the Judeans to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. Again, this is Cyrus speaking, and this is in the first year of his reign. Yahweh, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build a temple for him at Jerusalem in Judah. Any of his people among you may go up to Jerusalem and Judah and build the temple of Yahweh, the God of Israel, the God who is in Jerusalem, and may their God be with them. So he can't return the idols to the house of Yahweh because we don't worship idols. Well, at least we're not supposed to be worshiping idols. But what he does return is brought out the articles belonging to the temple of Yahweh, which Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem, and placed them in the temple of his God. And it speaks explicitly, it gives a list in the end of the book of Jeremiah, exactly, or the end of the book of 2 Kings, exactly what items had been taken from the temple. And so Cyrus orders that they be brought out and returned to the temple in Jerusalem. Very much in line with what we see in the Cyrus cylinder, where he's returning the gods to their original temples, thereby winning the favor of those peoples and their gods. Again, since we didn't have an idol, we didn't have a god, lowercase g, to be returned to our temple, he takes out the vessels that have been stolen by Nebuchadnezzar and gives them to the Jews to go back to Jerusalem so that they could rebuild the temple. And in fact, they do rebuild the second temple. That's spoken about in both the books of, really in the book of Ezra. Okay, interesting stuff. Any questions, any comments? Any questions, any comments? If not, then we will take a break for a minute, and then we're going to we'll continue learning the book of Zechariah, the book of Zechariah. So see you guys back in just a couple of minutes. Put up a bit of music, and you will take a break. Let's see what we can put on. Sure that works. I'll put that at the end. This works. So we'll be right back. Hey, we're back. We're back. Okay, so welcome back to the study. We're going to be digging in now to the book of Zechariah. And let me share the screen. So we are up to chapter 6 in Zechariah. Let's just get a little review of what we studied last week in chapter 5. So we had the flying scroll and the woman in the basket, right? So let's read through this very quickly in the English just to get a review. So I looked again, and before me was a flying scroll. He asked me, meaning the person speaking to me, the angel speaking to me, what do you see? I said, I see a flying scroll, 20 cubits long and 10 cubits wide. And he said to me, this is the curse that is going out over the whole land, for according to what it says on one side, every thief will be banished. And according to what it says on the other, everyone who swears falsely will be banished. Yahweh Almighty declares, I will send it out, and it will enter the house of the thief and the house of anyone who swears falsely by my name. It will remain in that house and destroyed completely, both its timbers and its stones. So that's the end of that prophecy. Then the angel who was speaking to me came forward and said to me, look up and see what is happening. I asked, what is it? He replied, it's a basket. I'm sorry, what is appearing, not what's happening. He replied, it's a basket. And he added, this is the iniquity of the people throughout the land. Then the cover of lead was raised, and there in the basket sat a woman. He said, this is wickedness. And he pushed it. Must have been Candace Owens or, I don't know, Kamala Harris. Okay. And he pushed it back into the basket and pushed its lead cover down on it. I would like to do that to Candace Owens and Kamala Harris. And then I looked up, and there before me were two women with the wind in their wings. They had wings like those of a stork, and they lifted up the basket between heaven and earth. Where are they taking the basket? I asked the angel who was speaking to me. He replied, to the country of Babylonia, to build a house for it. When the house is ready, the basket will be set there in its place. So remember, Zechariah is having all of these kind of very bizarre visions, very different. If you remember the book that we studied before, which was Malachi, and Malachi was dialectics. It was a conversation between Yahweh and Israel. Yahweh was answering questions, and Israel was asking questions or raising issues, raising challenges, and Israel was answering, and vice versa. So very different, and really, the book of Zechariah is unique with these endless wild visions. At least the first part of the book of Zechariah. There are other places where there are visions, but it's not so persistent and not so many of them. Of course, we see visions in the book of the beginning of the book of Ezekiel. We see Isaiah's various visions, but these are just wild visions. Okay, so let's start it up. Oh, I didn't. What's going on here? Oh, okay. Yes, let's see it, right? Yes. Okay, so now we're going to start in Zechariah chapter 6, and we're going to dig into the Hebrew. And we've got our usual translation that I use, the Robert Alter, and interpretation. So we'll get another set of eyes on it. It's always good. So this is Zechariah speaking. Wa ashuv, wa esa inai. So I returned, or once again, I came back again, meaning he's having another vision. I lifted up my eyes. And remember, we saw this phrase, lifted up my eyes, already a number of times in the previous visions. So, for instance, the same phrase exactly appears with the flying scroll vision. So in other words, ashuv meaning, literally it means I came back, but that's not the intention here. The intention is I saw another vision, and I lifted up my eyes. Wahine arba markavot yotzot miben shnei heharim. And I saw 4 chariots going out from between two mountains. And these mountains were made of brass, of bronze. So in the first chariot leading the first chariot were brown horses, adumim. So that would usually be translated as red, but that's not what it means. There's no such thing as a red horse. Just like the para aduma, which we learned about when we were studying the various elements of the sacrificial system and the purity/impurity system we learned about. They usually translate it as a red heifer, but it doesn't mean red. It means more like earth colored. Here they translate it as, it's translated as red, but there's no such thing as a red horse. I'm sure Robert Alter does a better translation. Let's see what he says. Bay horses. I don't even know what that means, but it ain't red, I can tell you that much. I don't know. Let's look it up. I'll learn something new, as I always do whenever I do these Torah studies. So what is a bay horse? So reddish brown to brown body with black points. So let's get an image of a bay horse. So light reddish brown to dark chocolate light brown. So it's basically a brownish horse, right? Some images. So it ain't red, right? It's not the color of a red M&M, that's for sure. So that's what's meant by red. It really means kind of earth colored, maybe blood colored. Okay. Ubemerkava shenit susim shorim, and leading the second chariot were black horses. Bemerkava shlishit. So remember, we see there are four chariots. Bemerkava shlishit susim levanim. Bemerkava harevi'it susim berudim mutzim. So the third chariot was being led by white horses, and the fourth in the fourth chariot was being led by dotted or spotted horses, and amutzim probably would be something like strong. Let's see how Robert Alter translates that one. So he says dappled spotted horses. Okay, fine. The same word appears, if I'm not mistaken, in Genesis. Let me just confirm that. Yeah. So, well, I won't get into the whole thing right now, but when Jacob has plotted to despoil Lavan of his wealth, he does this whole thing where he separates these akudim, nikudim, berudim, the striped, speckled, and mottled. That's why they're translating it there, but it's the same word, berudim. Bulls out, and those eventually, and then he puts he makes them look at I guess with striped sticks while they were mating, and so that somehow makes more of these types of bulls/cows be reproduced, and he ends up getting all of Lavan's wealth. So it's the same word. One is the same word being used here. Okay, so translating here as mottled, here as the NIV is translating it here as spotted, and Robert Alter is translating it as spotted. Okay, so we get the idea. Okay, so those are the four chariots. So we've got one with reddish brown horses, one with black horses, one with white horses, and one with spotted horses. Wa'an wa'omar el hamalach hadover bi, and I responded and said to the angel that was speaking to me. It's a very common phrase we're seeing here in the book of Zechariah, right? That the angel shows him something or says something, and then he responds and says, "Ma'ela Adonai, Adoni, what are these, my master?" I think we see that same language, if I remember correctly, in Zechariah chapter 1. Just find it, just to show how consistent these visions, not the actual content of the vision, although the first vision we saw was with horses as well. Right? Ma el Adoni. It's the same words, basically word for word. What are these, my master? This is the first vision that we saw of the main horse among the myrtle trees, and then a whole bunch of horsemen on horses behind them in different colored horses. Okay, so there's a lot of structural repetition. Ma el Adoni. It's the same words exactly. Verse 5. Wi'an hamalach va'yomer elai. So the angel answered and said to me, El arba ruchot shamayim. These are the four winds of the sky, four winds of the heavens. Yotzot mehit yatsev al adon kol haaretz. That have gone out from sitting before or being stationed before the master of all the earth, of all the world. Of course, speaking about God. Asher ba hasusim hashachorim yotzim el eretz tzafon. And the black horses, meaning that the black horses were, or specifically the black horses are coming out of the lands of the north. Wahalivanim yatsu el acharehem. And the white ones were coming after them. Birudim yatsu el eretz hateman. I'm sorry, I should say not from the land of the north here, to the land of the north. So the black horses went to the land of the north, and the white horses followed after them. And the spotted horses went to the land of the south. But it's Atiman. That's where we get the word Yemen from. So related to the word Yamin, which means to the right. Because that was south was considered to the right, because if you're looking at the rising sun, which is where essentially time and direction were measured, then the south is going to be to the right. It should be pointed out that when you enter the tabernacle, or later the temple, you're walking away from the rising sun, you're walking towards the west. But the time of day was measured from the rising sun to the setting sun. And so you look towards the rising sun, that was the reference point for directions. And so the spotted ones went out. Oops. So then the spotted ones went out and tried to, or attempted to walk throughout all of the land. And he said, and I assume that he is speaking about God, right? Because they're going out from, what does it say? From Adon Kol Haaretz, the master of the entire world. And he said, so go out into the world, in other words, wander all across the world, and they went out and wandered, traversed all of the earth. Okay, so he woke me up, or maybe got my attention, or yelled at, or screamed at me to get my attention. We daber elai lemor, and he said to me to say, "Ura'eh hayotzim el eretz tzafon hinichu et ruchi ba'eretz tzafon." So is this? I believe this is God, quote unquote, God speaking to Zechariah, saying, "Behold, those that went out to the land of the north, which we saw were the black horses, followed by the white horses, went to the land of the north. They caused my spirit to rest in the land of the north." All right, let's get a little bit of translation and interpretation and try to figure out what's going on here. Let me just check in to see if there are any comments or questions. Okay, so we don't really need the translation. Let's go directly to the. So we saw, well, we'll go with the translation just so we can get, again, the context and review it a bit. "And again, I raised my eyes and saw, look, 4 chariots were going out from between 2 mountains, and the mountains were mountains of copper." Okay, copper mountains. It's probably wise not to translate these details into any symbolism. The gap between the 2 mountains provides a dramatic entrance point for the chariots, and the fact that these mountains are copper highlights their supernatural character. Good. I actually agree with that statement, which I usually do with Robert Alter. He's very good. The first chariot had bay or red horses, right? Ruddy horses. And the second chariot, black horses. And the third chariot had white horses. And the fourth chariot, dappled, spotted horses. And I spoke out and said to the messenger speaking to me, "What are these, my lord?" And the messenger answered and said to me, "These are the 4 winds of the heavens, going out from standing in attendance before the master of all the earth." Okay. 4 winds of the heavens. So this is the idiomatic expressions for the 4 corners of the heavens. Wind can mean direction in Hebrew. The literal sense needs to be preserved in this case because the 4 chariots rushing off in 4 directions appeared to be the embodiment of winds, which have been standing in attendance before God. Okay. In which the black horses go out to the land of the north, and the white ones have gone out to the western sea. Let me look at that again in the Hebrew. Okay, that's his interpretation of that, but let's find the western sea. That's not what it says really in the Hebrew, but let's see what he has to say about it. And the dapple ones have gone out to the land of the south. Okay, verse 6, "To the western sea as elsewhere." This is the Mediterranean. The Masoretic text El Achareim, to after them, which is ungrammatical and also confusing. This translation supposes that the original meaning was El Hayama Acharon, or an equivalent phrase. Okay, so he's saying there was a textual error. We won't get into the details. El Hayama Acharon. Let me just look at that again in the Hebrew. So he's saying there was a textual error in the Masoretic texts here. It doesn't matter. And the red ones have gone out and sought to go about the earth. And he said, "Go about the earth," and they went about the earth. That's verse 7. So the red ones, the received text is Amutzim, the spotted ones, but this is synonym for the dappled ones who have already been accounted for. And the red horses seems to have disappeared. The translation therefore reads Adumim, the red ones. Fine, fair enough. This is somewhat puzzling because one would expect that these horses would head off in the 4th direction. Some scholars correct the phrase to had gone out to the east, but there is only a logical warrant for the emendation, not a textual one. Okay, anyway, he's speaking about a bunch of textual errors and things that don't exactly make sense, but we've seen so far that this is somewhat typical of the book of Zechariah. A lot of things don't really make sense. These are kind of wild visions, right? If we didn't know better, we'd say the guy was on mushrooms, something like that. I have some friends here in Katsrin, in the Golan Heights, who would definitely say that and might even want to do mushrooms with the guy. But we won't mention any names. A good friend of mine. Doesn't matter. Anyway, Wahi devar Yahweh elai lemor. So the word of Yahweh came to me saying, say, Lakoach me'et agola me-Chaldeh ומת-טוביה ומאת ידעיה בת עתה ביום ההוא ובת בית יושיע בן צפניה אשר באו מבבל. Okay, so let's see what's going on here. We have a bunch of names. So לקוח מאת הגולה. So the word of Yahweh came to me saying, So take, or this is really not a command in form. Okay, so I guess it is close to command in form. So take from the exiles, from Chedlai and from Tovia and from Yedaiah. These are the names of people. Ubatata beyomahu, and you shall come in that day. Ubata beit Yoshia ben Tzfaniah, and you'll come to the house of Yoshia ben Tzfaniah, Asher ba'u min Bavel, who came from Bavel. All right, so what's going on here? Let's get a translation. Did I skip a couple of verses? Yeah. Oh, yes, we did skip a verse. Okay, so he summoned me and spoke to me and said, see the ones going out the north, and pleased me in the land of the north. So that's not literally what it says. It says, have rested, caused my spirit to rest in the land of the north. But let's get Robert Alter's interpretation. Again, these are very difficult prophecies to unpack. And if you look at different interpreters, you're going to get a lot of different interpretations. So it is from the north that the destruction comes, and that is probably, and this is probably a prophecy of doom. So take from the exiles. The object of taking does not appear until the beginning of the next verse. It seems that some of the returning exiles brought substantial riches with them. So take from the exiles from Hildi and from Tobiah and from Jediah who have come from Babylonia, and as for you, on the day you shall come to the house of Josiah, son of Zephaniah. So these are exiles. Verse 11. ולקחת כסף וזהב, ועשית עטרות. So you shall take silver and gold, and you shall make crowns, or they translate as diadems, kind of like a what's called crowns. ושמת בראש יהושע ben Yehotzadak, הכהן הגדול. And you shall place it on the head of Yoshua ben Yehotzadak, the Kohen Agadol. And we saw this Yoshua earlier in Zechariah in chapter, was it 2? Let's go take a look for a second. One second. 3. Yeah. Right, so we saw that that Yoshua, the high priest, had disgusting clothes, literally shit-covered clothes, a bigadim atzoim, and they were removed from him and replaced with white clothes or clean clothes. And this was a symbolic for the redemption or for the forgiving that Yahweh does of all of Israel, that Yahweh forgives all of Israel. Okay. Okay, we'll go back to Zechariah 6. So this Yoshua, the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, is mentioned earlier. So so this seems to be a kind of almost a similar kind of prophecy by placing the crown of silver and gold on Yehoshua ben Yotzadak, the high priest. This is again speaking about the redemption, of the forgiving by Yahweh of Judea, of Jerusalem. All right, let's go on. Wilmat elau lemor, and you shall say to him, Ko amar Yahweh Tzevaot, so says Yahweh of hosts. We'll just leave that translation to saying, Hine ish tzemach shemo umitaktav yitzmach bana et echal Yahweh, saying, behold, there is a man whose name is Tzemach, and under him and under his rule, he shall yitzmach, shall flourish, and he shall build the temple, or the temple of Yahweh. Okay, so what's going on there? Let's take a look. So, and you shall say to him, saying, thus says the Lord of armies, saying, here's a man named Branch, and from his place it shall branch out, and shall build the Lord's temple. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's go on to verse 13. And he will build the temple of Yahweh, and he will lift up glory. He will raise up glory, cause glory to rise up. And he will return or sit and rule over his throne. And the priest will be on his throne. And a council of peace will be between them. So this is speaking about a governor or a king that is going to build the second temple, and that the Kohen Gadol will be restored, the high priest will be restored, and there'll be peace between the ruler over Judea and the high priest. Okay, so what's going on here? So he translates, okay, the word atarot is not the word generally used for royal crowns, and the high priest will be wearing a diadem, not a crown. The priest shall be by his throne. The preposition could also mean on, but priests do not have thrones, and this translation follows an interpretation proposed by Kimchi and others. There shall be a council of harmony between the two of them. This prophecy of smooth cooperation between Zerubbabel and Joshua probably reflects a sense that there might be some tension between them. Zerubbabel is of the Davidic line, but in pointy of the Persian rulers, whereas Joshua is the legitimate heir to the high priesthood with no foreign intervention. Zechariah repeatedly elevates Zerubbabel's importance as Davidic ruler. And we saw a similar prophecy in, I believe it was chapter 1, also regarding both. Let me find it here. It was chapter 2. Right, Yeshua. And let me find this for a second. So here we go. So this is, again, we have that same kind of language. This is Zechariah chapter 3, verse 8, and I'll just translate this. Hold up, let me just turn down the heat just for a second. It's very hot in here. My cat is enjoying it, but I'm not. All right, it's too hot for you. So this is Zechariah chapter 3, verse 8, and this is also a prophecy about Yoshua ben Yotzadak, the Kohen Gadol, and about someone called Tzemach, who's believed to be referring to Zerubbabel, one of the first returnees from Babylon, from Persia. So Shemana Yoshua Kohen Gadol. So listen. So pay attention now. Yeshua, the high priest. Ata u're'echa yoshvim lefanecha. You and your compatriots who are sitting before you. Ki anshe mofet hema, because they are people who stand out. Is that here translates it as a wondrous sign? Because behold, I am bringing my servant Tzemach. Tzemach, they're translating as branch or offshoot. At any rate, let's go back to Zechariah 6. So we saw that same language, that same imagery already back in Zechariah chapter 2, in chapter 3, I mean. Okay, let's get a little commentary here. We already read the commentary. And 14, ועטרות תהיה לחלם ולטוביה ולידעיה ולכן בן צפניה לזיכרון בהיכל יהוה. And this diadem that's going to be put on the Kohen Gadol, on Yeshua ben Yehozadak, that's taken from these rich returnees to Judea, Chelem or Tovia, and it mentions these names again. These are all names: Chelem, Tovia, Yedaya, Ulechen ben Tzefania, for people of Zikaron behechal Yahweh, and they shall be as a remembrance. In other words, this diadem is now going to be a remembrance, or what's the better word I'm looking for? Not a remembrance, a memorial within the temple of Yahweh. Urechokim ya'vo'u uvanu behechal Yahweh, and from far away they shall come and they shall build the temple of Yahweh. V'yadatem ki Yahweh tziva'ot shelachani, and you shall know that Yahweh of hosts has sent me elechem to you. V'haya im shamot yishma'un v'kol Yahweh Elohechem. If you will certainly listen to the instructions, to the voice of Yahweh your God. Let's get a little bit more commentary there. The most likely reference from the far away is to returning exiles who have already provided silver and gold for the temple. Zechariah may be seeking to promote a unity and purpose between those who remained in Jerusalem and those who have recently come back from Babylonia. Okay, so that sums up Zechariah chapter 6. Again, the language here is a bit confusing. This is Robert Alter's take on it. If we looked at other commentaries, we would probably get some very different takes on it. And so far, all of the prophecies we've seen of Zechariah have been somewhat confusing. They're going to get a little bit easier towards the second half of the book of Zechariah, but we'll pick that up next week. Let's stop here with Zechariah. We're going to go now on to Shabbat Shalom Christian. We're going to now take a quick break, and then we'll go on to Leviticus chapter 25. Any questions, any comments so far? Anybody? All right, let's take a break for a minute. We'll be back in a couple of minutes, and then we will continue on to Leviticus chapter 25. Okay, we're back. We are back, and we're going to dig into Leviticus chapter 25 right now, which we began last week. So let me share the screen. Okay, so let's take a look, I think, directly in the Hebrew. We'll just review very briefly. And I think we're starting, well, I know more or less where we're starting, so it doesn't matter. So Leviticus 25, remember this is speaking about the seventh, what's called the Shabbat year. It's called in modern Hebrew or in later Hebrew the Shemitah year. It's the year in which it's every seventh year in the land of Israel, the land is left fallow. There's no planting and there's no formal reaping for sale. You leave the land alone. And so therefore, this seventh year is called the Shabbat. Remember last week we spoke about the three things. Gotta go. 1 second. Maybe not. Hold on a second. There might be a siren here, so give me a second. Okay. So there's no siren here. The app went off, but there's no siren here in Katsrin at the moment, but there might be any second, which means I may have to go. And if I do, I'll come back probably about 10 minutes later. I hear the air raid sirens in the distance, but there hasn't been any that has gone off yet in the city where I'm living. Hold on a second. Let's open the window so I can hear it a little bit more. So I may have to get out of here in a second, and then I'll be back about 10 minutes later, hopefully. But so far, no sirens directly here in Katsrin where I live. Okay. I do hear sirens in the distance, however, the air raid sirens. All right, so let's go on now. And if the sirens go off here, I'm just going to take off very quickly. Okay, so, right. So we said that the seventh year is called the Shabbat. The Shabbat year. Or it's called actually a Shabbat. We spoke about three things in the Torah, three things and three things only that are referred to as Shabbat. One is the seventh day of the week, quote unquote Saturday. The second is Yom Kippurim. It's called the Shabbat because it's like the seventh day in the sense that there's a very strict restriction against doing work. And the third is the seventh agricultural year because the land rests just as we rest. Just as we rest every seventh day. So the land of Israel rests every seventh year. Just a side note about the rabbis. So the rabbis, let me just pop back to Leviticus chapter 23 for a second. So there's something called the Omer offering, the wave sheaf offering. I don't know if you can hear those booms in the background. Again, the sirens have not gone off here, so we're okay for now. So, okay. So Leviticus chapter 23, verse 11. So this is talking about the Omer offering, or the wave sheaf offering. So the barley harvest, the first fruits of the barley harvest, remember Yahweh, he always gets the first and he always gets the best. So if you're sitting at a table, let's say you're sitting at a table with, I don't know, a state dinner with President Trump, nobody eats until President Trump eats, I assume. If you're sitting at a Shabbat table, then almost always, the head of the household is going to eat first. He's going to take the first bite of challah, and then everyone else eats afterwards. So Yahweh is the head of household for the nation of Israel and for the world, but for the nation of Israel in this case. And so he eats first and he gets the best. So we take the first fruits of the first of the harvest, the barley harvest, and the barley harvest is associated with the festival of unleavened bread, Chag HaMatzot. The Aviv is the ripening of the almost ripe barley. And so the first fruits, the first of the barley harvest is taken and waved before Yahweh, symbolically giving it to him, thanking him for all he's done for us by giving him the first and the best. And when is this done? We see here in Leviticus chapter 23, verse 11, "Ohenif et omer lifnei Yahweh," and you shall, what's the word they use in English again? Wave, right? You shall wave the omer, or elevate, sometimes we'll translate it as Henifa omer, so you shall elevate the omer, and the omer is a bunch of barley stalks, before Yahweh, le'ritzonchem, in order to gain favor by him, mimacharat Shabbat, and this is the key word. So when, and again, this is talking a bit about the rabbi's misinterpretation of when this offering is supposed to be brought. So it says, when is this offering supposed to be brought? Mimacharat Shabbat, on the day after the Shabbat. We saw there are only three things in the Torah that are ever referred to with the word Shabbat. Number one is the seventh day of the week. Number two is the first day of Yom Kippur, is the day of Yom Kippurim, the day of atonement. And the third is the seventh agricultural year. So this can only be referring, this is the beginning of the year, can only be referring to the seventh day, in other words, quote unquote, Saturday. So when it says that you bring the first fruits of the barley harvest, this Omer offering, this wave sheaf offering, the day following the Shabbat, it must mean on a quote unquote Sunday. So the rabbis say that the word Shabbat here does not mean the seventh day of the week, does not mean Shabbat. They say that it means the first day of Passover. So the word Shabbat here is referring to the first day of Chag HaMatzot, of the festival of unleavened bread, and therefore the wave sheaf offering is always brought on the second day of Chag HaMatzot, of the festival of unleavened bread. So this year, rabbinical Chag HaMatzot began Wednesday night, which meant the first day was Thursday. So according to them, the Omer offering would be brought on Friday. It would have been brought yesterday. You don't bring the Omer offering because we're not in control of the Temple Mount. There's no altar there. There are no Kohanim, etc. But it would have been brought yesterday. So they would say this year that it would be brought on a Friday. But this could not be the case. When it says the day after the Shabbat, it must mean a quote-unquote Sunday. The word Shabbat here must mean the seventh day of the week. The word Shabbat cannot mean the first day of Chag HaMatzot, of the festival of unleavened bread, because Shabbat only refers to those three things that I mentioned. There's a similar word, Shabbaton, which we see throughout Leviticus 23, and I think we spoke about this when we were learning, I know we spoke about this when we were learning Leviticus 23, but there's a similar word, let me find it here. Let's find an example of it. One second. Grab it here. So the similar word, here's the word Shabbaton, but this is not a good example because it's speaking about the Yom Kippurim, which is also called the Shabbat. I'd like to find an example where the word Shabbaton is used. One second. Yeah, there we go, 23, 24. So I should have looked one verse, a couple of verses before. So the Zikaron Teruah, or Yom Teruah, the day of noise making or the day of trumpets, is called the Shabbaton. But it's not called the Shabbat. Second, please. Right. In Sukkot, let me just find that. And the first day of Sukkot is called a Shabbaton, but not a Shabbat. And the 8th day of Sukkot is called the Shabbaton, but not a Shabbat. So we see that these other holidays, such as Sukkot, Zikaron Torah, can be referred to with the word Shabbaton, but not the word Shabbat. You will never find the word Shabbat referring to anything aside from the three things that I mentioned. Shabbaton means, I like to translate it as a resty-like day. Okay, a rest kind of day, a restful day. But Shabbat is a, as I've mentioned many times before, is a proper noun. It's the name of the holiday. It's the name of the day. The 7th day, the name of that day is Shabbat. Just like your name may be Bob or Bill or Joe or whatever, Muhammad, or I don't know, Sven, whatever. It's a proper name. And that proper name really refers to that 7th day of the week. And then by extension, it's referring to Yom Kippurim and to the 7th agricultural year, but nothing else besides that. So when the rabbis say that regarding the day of the bringing of the Omer offering, the wave sheaf offering, that when it says Mimacharat Shabbat, the day after the Shabbat, that could mean the day after the first day of Passover, because they're saying the first day of Passover is Shabbat. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Absolutely impossible. They're dead wrong. Okay, getting back to Leviticus 25, where we were. Let me close this out. So the 7th agricultural year is also called the Shabbat because what's the similarity to the original Shabbat, meaning the base meaning of the 7th day? Because it occurs every 7 years. Shesh shanim tizra sadcha, v'shesh shanim tizmor kamecha v'safta et tvuata. So for 6 years you shall plant your field, plant seeds in your field. For 6 years you shall prune your grapevines. And again, anyone who's ever raised grapevines or ever grown grapevines knows that they have to be pruned, or else you're not going to get a good yield of grapes. It'll just be too bushy, and the grapes won't grow well, or they won't be easy to pick, and they won't grow well. So for 6 years you shall plant seeds in your field. You shall prune your grapevines, and you shall ingather its produce, meaning the produce of the land. And in the 7th year shall be a Shabbat, a rest year, a year of rest. But Shabbat is the proper name. It shall be Shabbat, a year of rest. Shall be for the land. Shabbat Yahweh. It is a Shabbat to Yahweh. Satcha lo tizra v'karmecha lo tizmor. You shall not plant any seeds in your field, and you shall not prune your grapevines. And we're going to get back. We're going to see the language here is amazingly similar to the language of the 7th day Shabbat, deliberately so. This is a deliberate extension or deliberate, I won't say figurative meaning, but an extended meaning of the base meaning of Shabbat, which is the 7th day of the week. But let's go on and translate. So et safiyah tzircha lo tzor. So anything that is that grows on its own, of any grains that grow on their own in that 7th year, lo tiktzor, you shall not harvest, and this means harvest for your own purposes, for sale. Ve'invei nizirecha, and any grapes that grow on their own or that are left over, shall we say. Here the translation of your unattended vine. Lo titzor, you shall not ingather, you shall not gather. Shnat Shabbaton yela aretz. It's a year of rest for the land. So things are going to grow, right? If you don't plant barley seeds, wheat seeds, if you don't prune your grapevines that year, still you're going to get some barley that's grown, right? Seeds are going to be left over from last year, or stalks will regrow. I guess really that maybe that won't happen, but seeds will have fallen on the ground. You're going to get some growth, some barley, wheat growth, some fruit growth, some grape growth, and you're not allowed to harvest that and sell it. It's not for sale. So what do you do with it? Verse 6. And so the that which is the result of the seventh year, the Shabbat year of the land. And this is an interesting grammatical construct. I can't remember what the official grammatical name is, but literally this says, "V'hayta Shabbat ha'aretz lechem." V'hayta Shabbat ha'aretz lechem la'achla. So it literally says the Sabbath of the land, the seventh year of the land, shall be for you to eat. Well, that doesn't make sense. You can't eat the Sabbath of the land. But this really means, and this is a construct we see a lot in biblical Hebrew, it means the output or the results of the seventh year of the land shall be for you for food. And I forgot what the official name for this grammatical phenomenon is, but the word is a stand-in for the results of that word. Let me think. I could even think of an example in English. Let's see. You're going to work all week, and your Thursday will pay for a new television. So obviously, it doesn't mean the day Thursday is going to pay for your new television. It means that which you make on Thursday is going to pay for a new television. That's kind of an example I could think of in English. Okay. At any rate, that which grows on its own during the seventh year is going to be for food. For you, for your manservant, your maidservant, your hired worker, your temporary resident that lives among you. And for the domesticated animals and for the wild animals that are in your land, shall be all of the produce to eat. Okay. So basically, you're not allowed to harvest the produce on your own. You leave it, and all who need may come and take. The poor person, the servant, the slaves, the hired worker, the day worker, what we call a day laborer, the seasonal worker. That's what essentially toshav would be. Maybe sechircha would be more like a seasonal worker. Toshav would be kind of like a temporary resident. At any rate, these are all people who are not part of the nation of Israel. They're interlopers. Well, it's not true exactly. The Eved and the Amma are, but these are people who have a low status, who are not economically privileged or independent in the nation of Israel. And so therefore, basically this is saying for all of those who are disadvantaged, who are living in Israel or found in Israel, including the animals, okay, that's what this seventh year food is to be. You're not to take it, harvest it, and sell it at market. So the language here, and a lot of the language for the seventh year, the seventh agricultural year, which is called the Shabbat, is deliberately mimicking, or deliberately, I don't like to use the word mimic because that has kind of negative connotations, is deliberately referring to the language about Shabbat. And to show you that, I want to bring us to Exodus chapter 20, the Ten Commandments, and you'll see something very interesting. So let me bring it over to the Hebrew. So what do we see in the commandment regarding Shabbat? Okay, so Exodus chapter 20, verse 8 says, "Chored Yom HaShabbat ekadsho." So remember this, the day of the Shabbat, the seventh day of the week, and make it holy. To make it holy. Sheshit yamim ta'avod v'asita kol melachtecha. For 6 days you shall work and do all of your tasks, your necessary tasks. V'yom hashvi'i Shabbat liYahweh Elohecha. But the seventh day is a Shabbat. Again, we see it's a proper name of the day, to Yahweh your God. Lo ta'aseh kol melacha. You shall not do any unnecessary tasks, any work. Ata uvincha bitecha, you, your son, your daughter, abdecha ma'amatcha, your male servant, your female servant, behemtecha, and your animal, your domesticated animals, megircha asher b'sharecha, and your convert, for lack of a better word, that lives among you, lives in your gates. Okay? Let's compare this language here with the language in Leviticus chapter 25, starting in verse 3. And let's look at the deliberate comparison that the Torah is making. So for 6 years, you shall plant your fields, plant seeds in your field. You shall prune your grapevines, and you shall gather the produce of the land. For 6 years, you shall do that. Here in Exodus 20, for 6 days, you shall work and do all of your tasks. 6 years, you shall do all this to the land, plant, prune, etc. 6 days, you shall do all of your work. Uvashana shvi'it Shabbat Shabbaton ye'el haaretz. But in the seventh year, it shall be a Shabbat, a year of rest for the land. Uvayom shvi'i Shabbat liYahweh Elohecha. And in the seventh day, it shall be a Shabbat to Yahweh your God. It's the same language. Not quite word for word, but almost. Okay? And here we have Shabbat liYahweh. Here we have Shabbat. Here we have Shabbat liYahweh. Seventh year shall be a Shabbat liYahweh. The seventh day shall be Shabbat liYahweh. Seventh day is a Shabbat liYahweh. Here we have the seventh year. In the seventh year, it's a Shabbat liYahweh. It's a Shabbat to Yahweh. Okay? Lo ta'aseh kol melacha. You shall not do any work. In Leviticus 25, regarding the seventh agricultural year, you shall not plant seeds in your field, and you shall not prune your grapevines. And you shall not and you shall not take any of the grains that grow on their own. And you shall not take any of the grapes that grow on their own. Okay, Shanat Shabbaton Yeh La'aretz. It's a year of rest for the land. So far you see the parallelism, and then Exodus 20, speaking about the seventh day. You, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, your male servant, your female servant, and the domesticated animal, and the convert that lives among you in your gates, Here, so this shall be this seventh agricultural year. What does grow during that seventh agricultural year on its own shall be for you, and your manservant, and your maid, and your female servant, and the day laborer, and the temporary resident that lives among you. It's the same language, deliberately. Just as we don't work on the seventh day. In Exodus 20, we don't work on the seventh day, so that our son, our daughter, our servants, our animals, and those who live temporarily among us, like here, I think in this case is permanent, but those who live among us, who are not native-born Israelites, so that they don't have to work. That's why we don't work on the seventh year, on the seventh day, and we allow them also to rest. So just as we allow the land to rest on the seventh year, that whatever grows on its own is going to be for that, essentially that same, it's not word for word, but it's essentially that same class of people. All of those who are underprivileged, the poor, the widow, the orphan, the slave, the maidservant, the animals, that leftover, that produce that grows on its own is going to be for them, right? So we see deliberately the language, the parallelism or the imitation in Leviticus 25 of the 7th agricultural year, the Shabbat year, to the language that's used in Exodus 20 for the 7th day of the week, the day of rest, the Shabbat day. And it's deliberate. That's why the 7th agricultural year can be called the Shabbat, because it's using that same 7-year cycle, and this is a 7-year cycle, but it's imitating that 7-day cycle. And on that seventh, just as on the 7th day cycle, we rest, and our sons, daughters, manservants, maidservants, etc. rest. On the 7th agricultural year, the land rests, and ourselves, who also need to eat, but also our servants, our temporary residents, our day laborers, our animals, they eat the produce of the land, right? It's a deliberate extension or comparison to the original Shabbat, which is the 7th day of the week, right? You see how beautiful that is? That's why you can call the 7th agricultural year a Shabbat. That's why you can call Yom Kippurim a Shabbat, because on Yom Kippurim there's a strict cessation of work. But you cannot, just to go back to what I was saying before about the Omer offering, you can never, it's impossible, it's inconceivable that you can call the first day of Chag HaMatzot the Shabbat. You can call the Shabbaton, you cannot call the Shabbat, because there's no complete cessation from work. There's no seven cycle of 7. There's none of those elements. Okay. So, any questions, any comments about this so far? Any questions, any comments? All right, so I want to bring up one relevant archaeological find. Maybe I should have done this as the biblical archaeological find for the day, but we'll do it now, and that's called the Gezer calendar. So what is the Gezer calendar? The Gezer calendar, by the way, is the oldest one of the oldest, but basically the oldest. Well, it's not clear if it's Hebrew. Okay, we'll go with one of the oldest examples of Paleo-Hebrew or early Phoenician writing. It's one of the oldest Hebrew finds, if it's Hebrew at all. It might be Canaanite. So let's learn about this a little bit. So this is the Gezer calendar, first of all. Bring it up here. It was found in the city of Gezer, which you can visit today. It's kind of a bit south of Jerusalem. They've excavated. You can visit the ancient city of Gezer, which has been excavated. And there it is. So it's a tablet with Paleo-Hebrew writing chiseled into it. It's stone. Okay. So the full text translation, the inscription lists an annual cycle of agricultural activities divided into monthly or bi-monthly periods. It likely begins around the month of September, October, Tishrei. So 2 months of harvest, 2 months of sowing, 2 months of late planting, 2 months of hoeing flax, 1 month of harvesting barley, 1 month of harvest and measuring wheat, 2 months of vine pruning, grapes, and 1 month of summer fruit, figs. Okay? So let's read a little bit about it. God, I hate this. It pops up, but no big deal. So scholars debate the tablet's exact function, but common theories from Wikipedia and the Jewish Virtual Library include, so it's usually known as this first one, a schoolboy exercise. The crude rudimentary style of the letters and the repetitive structure suggests it may have been a mnemonic device or writing practice. It doesn't matter, actually. None of this matters. Let's see. Yes, that's what we want. Just click on this. No. So how these ancient seasons align with the modern Hebrew calendar months. Let's get Rabbi Wiki Rabbi AI to tell us a little bit about that. And then we'll go back and see what the significance is and its relevance to the agricultural year. So the Gezer calendar begins in the autumn, aligning with the civil start of the year, rather than the spring-based religious calendar for counting festivals like Passover. So I'm going to talk a bit about more about this in a second. So this in no way, shape, or form implies that the new year starts in the fall. In fact, well, we'll talk about it when we get further into Leviticus chapter 25. Because we're going to see a specific phrase, and then we can relate back to the Gezer calendar. If not this week, we'll do it next year. So because the tablet identifies agricultural tasks rather than naming months, scholars from the blah, blah, blah have mapped into the modern Hebrew Gregorian calendar. We already saw this. At any rate, 2 months of gathering, that's where it starts. September to November. 2 months of sowing, and that's going to be November through January. 2 months of late planting. 1 month of reaping flax. 1 month of barley harvest. 1 month of wheat harvest. 2 months of vine pruning, and 1 month of summer fruits. Okay. We'll read a little bit more. We'll just read to the bottom of this part here. So key observations. The first month, the calendar starts with the olive harvest, the Sif, which corresponds to the biblical feast of ingathering Sukkot, held in the 7th month Tishrei. The month of reaping flax corresponds to Nisan. This aligns with Exodus 9:31, which notes that during the plague of hail, the flax was already in blossom while the barley was in the ear. So a dual year, this 10th century BCE system predates the adoption of Babylonian month names like Tishrei and Nisan that occurred after the exile. It reflects a strictly solar agricultural cycle used by the Israelites to manage their land and taxes. Okay, so we get the idea. Let's put this aside for a moment. That's the Gezer calendar, and we'll see exactly what its significance is if we get to it today. If not, then we'll do it next year. I mean, not next year, next week. The bottom line is this in no way, shape, or form proves that the new year starts in the fall, as the rabbis claim it does. In fact, I saw a very interesting lecture. Unfortunately, it's in Hebrew, so I can't share the link unless you know Hebrew. Text me and I'll send it to you. About the history of the Hebrew calendar, stating that it was essentially in the Greek period that the rabbis or the Pharisees switched over to a calendar that begins in the fall and invented their false holiday of Rosh Hashanah, which is really our holiday of Yom Teruah. Okay, we're going to now talk about the Jubilee year. I'm going to end soon. It's already 8:00 p.m. here, but let's at least get into the Jubilee year. I've always said Leviticus 25 is one of my favorite chapters. I don't know why. It's beautiful and fascinating. There's so much going on here. Okay, any questions, any comments before we dig into the Jubilee year? So what is the Jubilee year? Let's read and find out. So we finished the Shabbat year, the 7th agricultural year, the Shabbat year. It's not called the Shemitah year. In modern Hebrew, called the Shemitah year, but it's really called the Shabbat year, the Shabbat. Okay, verse 8. Now we're going into the Jubilee year, the Yovel in Hebrew. Verse 8, Safarta lecha sheva Shabbatot shanim. So you shall count. Oh, there's so much to say here, my God. I'm going to post, because a lot of this is covered in the article I wrote on Karaite Insights a bunch of years ago, many years ago. Boy, does time fly. But let me at least put up the link. So you want more information about a lot of these things that we're talking about right now, you can read this article on your free time. I'll post the link. Okay. And right. So Usafat lecha sheva Shabbatot shanim. So you shall count for yourselves 7 Shabbat years. So what's a Shabbat year? We know what a Shabbat year is. It's this 7th agricultural year. So you count yourself 7 of those 7th agricultural years, meaning a total of 49, as it will say explicitly. Okay. Sheva Shanim, Sheva Pamim. 7 years, 7 times. Does this remind you of anything? If it doesn't, it will in a second. Hayu lecha yemei sheva Shabbatot ashanim tesha v'arba'im shana. And it shall be for you the days of the 7 Shabbat years, or Shabbats of years, really Shabbat years, tesha v'arba'im shana, 49 years. Okay, let's go back to Leviticus 23, and I'll just do it in the English to make it go more quickly. And we're going to see how brilliant, I mean, it's the whole cycle, the system is so brilliant. So let's talk about the festival of Shavuot, the festival of weeks. I'm going to read it very quickly in the English. From the day after the Shabbat, the day you brought the Omer offering, the sheaf of the wave offering, count 7 full weeks. Count off 50 days up to the day after the 7th Shabbat. So you're counting 7 cycles of Shabbats. We bring the Omer offering on the day after the Shabbat. Which Shabbat? That's another discussion we won't get into right now. But the day after the Shabbat, meaning on Sunday, you bring the Omer offering, the first fruits of the barley offering we bring to God, Yahweh. Then we count off 7 more Shabbats. So that's a total of 49 days from that original Shabbat. And the following day, which is going to be a Sunday again, what do we do? So the day after the 7th Shabbat, then present an offering of new grain to Yahweh. Mincha chadashah, it says in Hebrew. A new grain offering. What is this grain offering? It's the first fruits of the wheat harvest. So if you live in Israel, or I guess maybe anywhere in the world, but in Israel, you'll see the barley. If you look around now, you'll see barley all over the place in Israel. It's the barley harvest time. The wheat is still pretty much grass, or maybe grass with a very small stalk coming up. The wheat will not ripen for about another month and a half, 2 months, which is exactly 50 days later. So 50 days after you bring 49 days to be exact, after you bring the Omer offering, the first fruits of the barley offering, then you bring a new offering, Mincha Chadashah, you bring a new offering, and that's the first fruits of the wheat harvest. And it says so explicitly, from wherever you live, bring 2 loaves made of 2/10 of an ephah of finest flour, okay, solet in Hebrew, which means wheat flour, baked with yeast. And by the way, since this is not a fire offering, it doesn't go on the altar, it's allowed to be leavened as a wave offering. So it's another wave offering of first fruits to Yahweh. So there are actually 2 wave offerings. This is the wave sheaf offering of barley. This one here. That occurs the day after the Shabbat, around Passover time, around Hakham, around the Festival of Unleavened Bread. And then 7 weeks later, exactly 7 weeks after we bring that barley offering, which is stalks of barley, it's called a sheaf, stalks of barley tied together. Then we bring another offering, a new offering, which is it's an offering of wheat, but it's not stalks of wheat tied together. This time it's 2 loaves of wheat bread, leavened bread, chametz, and so on and so forth. And then a bunch of sacrifices to go with that. The point is, we see a repetition of cycles. So we bring the first fruits offering of the barley, the Omer offering, the wave sheaf offering. We then count 7 Shabbats. That's a total of 49 days. And then the following day, the 50th day, is the new offering, is the wheat offering. Well, that's the cycle we see here exactly. I mean, I won't say exactly. Similarly, we have 7 Shabbat years. Each of those 7 years, the land lies fallow. There's no planting. There's no harvesting for commercial reasons. And all of the poor and downtrodden eat of the whatever produce grows on its own. We count 7 of those agricultural years, just like in Leviticus 23, we count 7 Shabbats between the barley wave sheaf offering and the wheat wave loaf offering on the holiday of Shavuot, the holiday of weeks. That's why it's called the holiday of weeks. Or maybe there's 7 of them. It's double entendre. So you see the repetition and cycle. Now we're counting 7 cycles of, just as in Leviticus 23, we count 7 weeks, 7 cycles of 7 days. Here we're counting 7 cycles of 7 years, of those 7 Shabbats. Another proof that it could not mean, when it says Shabbat in Leviticus 23, speaking about the wave sheaf offering the day after the Shabbat, it couldn't mean the first day of Passover. Because what does it mean if according to the rabbis, that wave sheaf offering could be brought on a Thursday? So how are you counting 7 Shabbats? You're counting 7 Thursdays? No, it says count 7 Shabbats. We saw it in Leviticus 23. So the rabbis will say that the word Shabbat there means week. It doesn't make any sense what they're saying. And if you read the article, I go into great detail about this. At any rate, we're going to count 7 Shabbat years, 7 years in which the land of Israel lies fallow, lies unattended, is allowed to grow on its own. Tesha Arba'im Shana, for 49 years. It's the same cycle. It's an imitation or a replication of the cycle we saw in Leviticus chapter 23. Ve'avat shofar. תרועה בחודש השביעי בעשור לחודש ביום הכיפורים תעבירו שופר בכל ארצכם. So you shall, this is so beautiful, it just blows me away. So in that 49th year, which is going to be that 7th agricultural Shabbat, that 7th Shabbat year, ve'avat shofar teruah, you shall cause to pass around. Basically, you're going to blast a shofar teruah, a loud shofar, or a noise-making shofar. You're going to blast the shofar. What is a shofar? A shofar is a ram's horn. Okay, let's get a picture. I'm sure you guys have all seen it, but what is a shofar? Shofar. Okay, so a shofar is an ancient musical instrument made from the horn of a kosher animal, most commonly a ram. I guess it doesn't technically have to be a ram, but traditionally it's a ram. And there, it's a ram's horn. You can see them all over Israel today because still, even though the rabbis made up this idea of the first day of the 7th biblical month being Rosh Hashanah, being the beginning of the new year, which I will debunk, if not this week, I will clearly debunk it next week, that nonetheless, they still consider it Yom Zikaron Teruah, Yom Teruah, the day of blasting on the shofar. So at any rate, on Yom Kippurim of this 7th agricultural Shabbat, the 7th Shabbat year, you shall blast on a shofar throughout your land. The Chodesh HaShvi'i, on the 7th month, Asor LaChodesh, on the 10th day, Yom Kippurim, on the day of atonement. Ta'aviru shofar b'chol atzachem. You shall make the shofar, the blast of the ram's horn, be heard throughout all of your land. And by the way, you can hear this if you ever are in Israel, on Yom Teruah, on the first day of the 7th month. Of course, the rabbis might do it differently from the biblical day, but the rabbinical first day of the 7th month, you'll hear shofars all over Israel. So you can actually hear what this sounds like if you come to Israel in September, more or less. It's not a hamishim shana. Shana ukratem dror ba'aretz l'chol yoshveha. I just want to parse this correctly in my head for 1 second. Gidashtem et shnat hamishim. Right. So you shall sanctify the 50th year, and I'm going to talk about exactly what that 50th year means. And then we're going to see how that relates to the Gezer calendar. And we're going to see how this debunks the rabbi's idea of Rosh Hashanah, of the new year coming out in the fall. We're going to see how stupid they are, how stupid they sound when they try to imply that, and how they misinterpret the Torah or read into the Torah or over-literalize the Torah. Again, as I always say, it's ironic that the rabbis accuse the Karaites of over-literalizing the Torah when it's the rabbis that consistently do it. And the most famous example is tefillin, phylacteries. You know what that is. I won't get into it right now. Okay. So you shall sanctify, you shall make holy or declare holy the 50th, the 50th year count. ba'aretz l'chol yoshveha, and you should declare freedom in your land for all its inhabitants. So this is a famous quote. Does anyone know where you see this quote in English? You should declare freedom throughout your land. Where does that appear in American history? Well, let's take a look. You guys ever hear of the Liberty Bell? Remember, it was almost like mandatory every couple of years when I was in elementary school. We used to take a trip down to Philadelphia. I grew up in the suburbs of New York, and we had to take a trip down to Philadelphia every couple of years to visit the Liberty Bell. It was very interesting. So Liberty Bell, what does it say on the Liberty Bell? You can get a good picture of it. Let's see if this works. Oh boy, that didn't work out too well. Images. It's a replica, but it doesn't matter. So you can kind of see it. Proclaim liberty. Let's see if we can get a better view of it. Liberty Bell, proclaim. Maybe this is a better view of it. So famously symbolizing America is dated 1753. The biblical text reads, proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto the inhabitants thereof. So when you see it, you can't see the whole thing, but you get the idea. That's what's written on the Liberty Bell. These 4 words are translated to English and written on the Liberty Bell. Dror, I'm sorry, 5 words. Kratem dror ba'aretz l'chol yoshveha. You should declare liberty throughout the land for all its inhabitants. Okay. Alrighty. I think I'm going to end in a couple minutes and we'll pick it up next week. So, Yovel hi. So this is the Jubilee year. This is usually translated as Jubilee year, but let's get a better idea of what this word really means. Okay, so it's usually just transliterated. Yovel and Jubilee are the same word. Vel, ba, Yovel, Jubilee, right? Yovel, Jubilee. It's the same word. So it's usually not translated. It's just transliterated. But we see that the word really means here, a ram's horn. And it appears in a bunch of different places. So let's take a look at one. Very famously, Joshua chapter 6, verse 5. You guys will recognize this one. And the walls came tumbling down, and so on and so forth. So Joshua 6, chapter 5. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites, meaning barred off. No one went out, and no one came in. Then Yahweh said to Joshua, see, I've delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have the 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. Man, I wouldn't want to be one of the residents of Jericho. Man, that must have been scary as all heck. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give it a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up. Everyone straight in it. And let's look at that in the Hebrew. This is Joshua chapter 6, verse 5. See the same word here. So literally this means, and it shall be when there is a long blast, or the blast is extended, bimshoch, when there's an extension of the Bekeren Yovel, or when there's a long blast on Bekeren. Keren means horn. In fact, the word horn can be traced back to this etymologically to the word keren, keren, horn, corn, keren, corn, horn. And I'm not making it up. That can actually be traced back through the various languages. So the word horn comes from this Hebrew word keren. So and keren means a horn. So on the horn of the Hayovel, of the Jubilee, and here they translate it as the ram, or the ram's horn. So when there's a long blast on the ram's horn, right? So that it means a ram's horn. So Yovel is specifically a ram's horn. Okay. So when you hear the blast on the horn, the sound of the horn, the entire nation shall raise up its voice and make a huge shout and make a huge amount of noise. This is talking about with their own voices, because they didn't all have ram's horns. So we get the picture. And that seventh day, the ram's horn is blasted. And what's the name for ram's horn? Yovel, on the Jubilee. So when there's a long blast on the Jubilee horn, so Jubilee, we said, means the ram's horn specifically. Shofar means just an animal horn, which is traditionally a Yovel. So a Yovel, a Jubilee, is a type of shofar. It's a subset of shofar. And a shofar is a general term for any animal horn that's blasted on, whereas the Yovel or Jubilee is the ram's horn that's blasted on. So you make a huge shout, a huge amount of noise, and the walls shall come tumbling down. Literally, it says the walls of the city shall fall down upon themselves. And each person shall go up with the other person. In other words, then all of you will go up and conquer the city. Okay, so we see the word Yovel, Jubilee. So we know now what Jubilee means. Okay, Yovel hi ti'elechem. So it shall be the Jubilee year. Because why? Because on that seventh day, on the 10th day of that seventh month, this is blasting, is the blasting on the ram's horn, on the shofar, on the animal horn. Now we know it's the ram's horn because it's called the Yovel, which is the blasting on the ram's horn. So that next year, the 50th year, is going to be the Jubilee year, or the horn, the blasting on the ram, the year of blasting on the ram's horn, or the year after the blasting on the ram's horn. That's really what it means. Okay, so it should be the Jubilee year for you. B'shaftim ish el achuzato ish el mishpachto tashuvu, and each person returns to his land inheritance. Okay, I'm going to stop here because I want to do this justice, and there's so much going on here. And in fact, this is proof, and we're going to take into account the Gezer calendar next year. This is proof that the year starts in the spring, and the Gezer calendar will prove this to us. This is these verses are brilliant proof that the year starts in the spring, not in the fall. The rabbis will actually use these verses to try to say that it starts in the fall, but they're misinterpreting the verses. They're idiots. They're a bunch of idiots. I'm sorry to say, but they really are. Okay, we're going to stop here. We've been going at it for about 3 hours. It's late here. It's 8:20 p.m. and I want to wind down for the day. I want to make some dinner for myself. So let's pick it up next week. One second. So, any questions, any comments before we end it for the day? Anybody? Going once, going twice, going thrice. I see Daniel's prophecy. I'm not sure what you're referring to there. Mehmet Toglu DR7PF, but whatever it is, ask me next week, and maybe we can get into it. Anybody else? Last opportunity for questions, comments. If not, then I thank you for joining me. Once again, I'll just give a quick plug. We are working on a bunch of projects. So we have already set up a Karaite community here in the Golan Heights. We had a Karaite Seder last night. It was beautiful. We have regular Karaite meetings, World Alliance of Qara'im meetings, and we have a whole bunch of plans. We want to set up a school. We want to set up a yeshiva, a learning center. We want to start publishing a lot of material. And in order to do that, you guys know by now, I'm not a materialistic person, and I hate speaking about money or asking for money. But what's the quote? No, I'm not going to say it. Anyway, so it's a funny quote, but I won't mention it because it's a little bit off color. But anywho, please, please, please support our mission either by donating to us directly or by becoming a member of the World Alliance of Qara'im. It's inexpensive to become a member. It's about half the price of a cell phone service, a monthly cell phone service. If you tithe or if you give a portion of your salary to tzedakah, to charity, please think about directing it towards us. I'll post this. Let's see if it comes up all right. If not, then I'll just put the 2 links. All right, close enough. Oops, it's being cut off. Let me do it this way. Hold on 1 second. Just give me 1 second. I'll try this one more time. And grab this one. This will work a little bit better. There we go. Those are the 2 links. Okay. So to donate or to become a member, please do. We really, really want to do great things. And we can't do it without, we have to live in the real world. We can't do it without financial support. So if you haven't done so already, if you find that you get a lot out of our teachings, and you guys know, anyone who knows me knows I am not a materialistic person. This is not going to go to a private jet or a BMW. Well, maybe a BMW, but not a private jet, I promise. I'm joking, obviously. But it's really helpful, okay? The more donations I get, then the less I can focus on my day job, which unfortunately I still have to do, computer programming, computer consulting, and the more I can start focusing full-time on the World Alliance of Qara'im, and that's the goal. I want to be focusing full-time. Once I get to the point where I can focus full-time on the World Alliance of Qara'im, then we can do some amazing things, okay? Already, I'm trying to use as much of my time as I can to do these things. You guys know my dedication. I've been doing this for 25 years. Never have I wavered. Never have I backtracked. Never have I sold myself out to, let's say, the Christians, no names mentioned, or to the rabbis. I've put up with a lot of crap and a lot of suffering. I've been thrown out of plenty of communities and synagogues, and I've even had death threats. It doesn't matter. None of this is relevant, but it just shows that I'm not messing around, and I've never been messing around. I've been doing this for 25 years straight. So please help out if you're not already doing so. Okay, enough about that. We will resume our regular Torah study next Shabbat. And if you are not part of our announcements group, then please look at the description where you saw the announcement for this talk, for this study. You can join our World Alliance of Qara'im, our WhatsApp group, our announcements. There's no charge whatsoever, and you'll be updated on any classes we have, any other activities that we have. So I thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you enjoyed the study. Hope you got a lot out of it. And I wish you all, wherever you are in the world, a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov. And we'll see you guys again, Be'ezarat Yahweh, with the help of Yahweh. We'll see you guys again next week. Shabbat Shalom and Shavua Tov. We'll go out with music, as always.
Thank